I have seen the professional Hearthstone player Zetalot playing on the ladder recently. He's a very famous priest player who has created some pretty interesting and unique priest decks, and this one's his latest. It's the Weblord Priest, and it's called that because of a card, Nerub'ar Weblord. This card has an interesting effect that counters a lot of what you'll see in the metagame these days. Minions with Battlecry cost 2 more mana anytime that this card is on the board. So it counters things like Dr. Boom, for instance, which has a Battlecry, but also the Paladin card Mysterious Challenger that is famed for Secret Paladin decks, making those cards have to come out 2 turns later than normal, giving a deck like this, which is focused on the late game, a lot more time to stabilize and set up a strong board. So the Weblord Priest is played as a counter to the current metagame. It has a couple really interesting things. They're essentially little groups of cards that have been teched into a standard Control Priest shell that allow this deck to take advantage of the natural synergies that Nerub'ar Weblord and cards like it tend to have. For instance, Nerub'ar Weblord has 1 attack. Other priest cards like Northshire Cleric have 1 attack. So you can start to see a theme establishing. Unstable Ghoul's really good in the metagame right now because there are so many 1/1 minions that tend to be out there, and Unstable Ghoul can clear them all. It has 1 attack. Acolyte of Pain is a really strong card draw card that's seen in a lot of control-style decks. It has 1 attack. So what card takes advantage of all these other cards that have 1 attack? That card, of course, is Hobgoblin. This 3-mana minion. Anytime you play a minion with 1 attack when Hobgoblin's on the board, Hobgoblin will buff those minions +2/+2. That means if you play a Hobgoblin and follow up with a Northshire Cleric, suddenly you've got a 3/5 1-mana card. Follow it up with a Nerub'ar Weblord, suddenly you got a 3/6 2-mana card. So all these strong priest cards and tech cards that we're adding in here that have 1 attack tend to have weak bodies for their mana cost. In other words, their stats aren't that good. You're playing them for the effects. But when you can take Hobgoblin and make those strong effect cards also have a powerful body, suddenly it makes them even more threatening and a lot stronger than they were, and they're already pretty good. So you're looking for big turns with Hobgoblin to buff a handful of these minions. For instance, you might want to play a Hobgoblin and at least 2 other minions to make sure that you get the full value of the stats from Hobgoblin. But sometimes even just playing 1 minion along with Hobgoblin will be enough for this deck. So, Nerub'ar Weblord's great at countering Battlecry cards, slowing down other decks in the meta, giving you time to stabilize. Hobgoblin kind of extracts some of that synergies with its 1 attack and other cards in the deck's 1 attack. But the other great thing about minions that have 1 attack, that they tend to have really high health totals. For instance, Tournament Medic, which has been added into this deck, is a 1/8 for 4 mana. Now that's not an exciting stat allocation. It doesn't trade into anything. It's terrible against other 4 and 5 drops. With Hobgoblin, though, it's a 3/8, or 3/10, excuse me, which isn't too bad. 3 attack you can actually start to work with a little bit. But that's not the only reason that's good in this deck. This deck has also added in a pretty standard priest combo using Divine Spirit and Inner Fire. Essentially, with Divine Spirit, you can double minions' attacks. So let's say we take a Tournament Medic that has 8 health. We double its health to 16. And then we double its health yet again to 32. And then we cast Inner Fire, which changes a minion's attack to be equal to its health. And suddenly you have a 32/32 Tournament Medic on the board, which can one-shot the enemy hero. So you have a few different cards in this deck that synergize with that combo. All of our minions have high health, like even Northshire Cleric has 3 health. That's pretty strong for a 1-drop. Weblord has 4 health. Acolyte of Pain has 3 health. Tournament Medic has 8 health, right? So if you manage to sneak in that combo, from time to time it will single-handedly win you games just because your opponent will tend to ignore a Tournament Medic that doesn't seem like a threat, but just for 3 or 5 mana you can turn it into a huge body that hits them for lethal damage out of nowhere. So that's another way that these weirdly stat-allocated cards like Nerub'ar Weblord with 1/4s tend to work well in this deck when they otherwise would just simply have too weak of a body to really accomplish anything. So finally, there's one other set of cards that benefit from these stat allocations, and that is your board clears, Light Bomb and Holy Nova. Light Bomb does damage to all minions on the board that's equal to their attack. So a 5/5, for instance, will kill itself. But all your minions have very low attacks by default, and much higher health, which means when you get in the mid game, you might tend to be a little bit behind on the board just because your minions have been weaker and haven't been trading efficiently. But using Light Bomb, you can usually clean up the enemy's side of the board pretty well without really impacting yours too strongly. For instance, your Northstar Cleric might just do 1 damage to itself, or your Tournament Medic just turns into a 1/7. It's really substantially not that different. So it's synergized with Light Bomb as well, and even Holy Nova, which tends to heal all of your high health minions and help keep them alive for a turn or two, even if they've taken some chippy or incidental damage. So you can start to see how these little pockets of cards that have been inserted into this normal control style priest deck all work together. And cards that wouldn't be very good on their own, like Nerub'ar Weblord, is terrible on its own. When you fit it into this shell, some unseen powers start to develop and you start to do some really fun and crazy and interesting things with this deck. And I've been playing it myself, and you'll be surprised how often you win games just on the crazy combo effect, on giant board clears from Light Bomb. You start to build up a really resilient board and use your hero power and your various heals to reinforce that board and your various buffs to build up all those little cheap minions. You have an army of minions before you know it that your opponent simply can't answer and can't deal with. And this deck excels so well in the late game thanks to all of its board clears and things like Fulgen and Sylvanas as your big legendary threats, that as long as you survive the early turns on the back of those cheap minions, those buffs, Defender of Argus taunts, as long as you can survive through that, once you enter the mid to late game, you'll really, really start to thrive. So if you've been haunted by secret paladins, if you hate when Dr. Boom hits the board, if in general battle cries have you down, I recommend you give this deck a try. I've been pretty successful with it on the ladder so far. I've seen Zetalot play it to a master level and climb up the ranks really quickly in this metagame right now. It's a fun deck. You'll surprise a lot of people. It gets to play with some cards that you don't usually see, like Hobgoblin and Nerub'ar Weblord. You can do crazy stuff like Shrinkmeister, a 4-attack Ysera, and steal it with a Cobble Shadow Priest. You can wipe away any board, no matter how scary it is, with Light Bomb. Some really fun things happen in this deck, and I recommend that you give it a try. It's really not too expensive to craft outside of Hobgoblin and a couple of legendaries, but you might be able to make some substitutions here and there to make it cheaper. But it's worth it just to get to play with Tournament Medic and Hobgoblin and Nerub'ar Weblord and even Shrinkmeister, which doesn't see all that much play. So have fun out there with the Weblord Priest. Take out some secret paladins for me. And until next time, game on.